Good afternoon, Evil, and I will tell you one story of a good viewing. When Emma brought little Sophie home from the adoption center, she thought the hardest part was filling her life with normalcy, school runs, bedtime stories, and trips to the playground. Sophie, barely 5, was quiet and wide-eyed, nodding politely whenever Emma asked her how her day went. Then one rainy afternoon, Sophie eased into her new routine. She withdrew into a corner with a fresh sheet of paper and a box of crayons. That night, Emma found the first drawing pinned to the fridge. At a glance it looked like a cheerful house under a smiling sun, but the sun's face had too many eyes and its smile was jagged as though carved by a knife. Emma frowned and carefully removed it, planning to ask Sophie about her strange imagination. Over the next week, more drawings appeared. Sophie tucked them inside Emma's cookbooks, slipped them between the pages of her diary, even taped them under the bathroom mirror. Each one portrayed similar scenes, a house surrounded by trees, but the trees all had knotted, twisted branches that curled into shapes like claws. Tiny stick figures with hollow eyes stood beneath them, mouths agape in silent screams. Once, Sophie drew a crayon figure of Emma sleeping in bed, but there was a dark shape looming over her, tall, formless, and ominously featureless. Emma's heart pounded as she surveyed the image. She knew her daughter couldn't have witnessed anything so terrifying, yet Sophie drew it with such precision that it sent icy fingers through her spine. "That one's just a monster," Sophie said, wide-eyed and sincere, when Emma confronted her in the living room. "I dreamt about it." But when Emma asked Sophie what the monster wanted, Sophie's mouth twisted into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You'll find out," she whispered. Emma tried to dismiss it as an overactive imagination. But then came the night noises, muffled thumps at the bedroom door when the house was silent, the crash of a book always right after Sophie fell asleep. Emma stumbled from bed to check, but the hallway would be empty, and when she returned, she'd find a new drawing in Sophie's hand, warm from the crayon strokes. One depicted 5 stick figures in a row, 2 adults, a teenager, a younger child, and an even smaller one standing behind a wide, open grave. Above the grave danced curly letter spelling family. Emma's mouth went dry. Disturbed, Emma reached out to the adoption agency. They told her Sophie had been in foster care after the tragic death of her birth family, but details were murky. Nobody could explain why she carried a locked box of drawings everywhere she went, or why she refused to throw them away. Emma lay awake that night, the box on her bedside table glowing faintly in the moonlight. She unscrewed the latch and opened it. Inside were dozens of tiny, folded drawings sealed with thick tape. Emma carefully unfolded the most recent one, a sketch of herself walking through the front door of the house with a black silhouette stepping out behind her, an unnatural curve to its limbs, dozens of spindly fingers, and a face shaped like a hollowed-out skull. She gasped, dropping the paper. The silhouette's head tilted slightly as though acknowledging her shock. Emma read no signature, no name, but the date in the corner was tomorrow's date. She checked her phone, tomorrow. Her breath caught in her throat. For the next 24 hours, Emma watched Sophie like a hawk. She locked the box in her nightstand and forbade any more drawings. Sophie pouted but obeyed. That night, Emma lay awake until exhaustion claimed her. She dreamed of the silhouette sliding under her door, its hollow eyes pressing against the wood, and she awoke with the taste of ash in her mouth. Morning arrived with sunlight that seemed stolen, pale, and ghostly. Emma unlocked the nightstand and bent to retrieve the box, only to find it empty. Sophie stood in the doorway, clutching a single drawing in her small fist. Her cheeks were stained with tears, and she held the sketch out for Emma to see. "It's time," Sophie said softly, her voice a hollow echo of the wind in a graveyard. Emma snatched the paper. The sketch was simple, 2 stick figures, Emma and Sophie, standing at the edge of a well, blackness yawning below. A jagged ladder led down into the void, and at the bottom, countless faceless shapes reached upward, clutching at nothing. Underneath, in Sophie's tight handwriting, were the words, "Mommy, come play." Emma's heart slammed. "Sophie, we need to talk," she whispered, but Sophie only smiled and closed the door as though sealing Emma inside. The house felt cold, as if winter had returned. Emma dialed the adoption agency again, but the line went dead. She tried her phone's map to call the police, but the signal cut in and out. Panicked, she rushed to Sophie's room only to find it empty. The sheets on the unmade bed were shredded into thin strips of white, and the once colorful drawings littered the floor like fallen leaves. Emma sank to her knees, her breath torn to shreds by grief and dread. Then she heard the creaking. Downstairs, the ladder to the basement, which had lain dormant since they moved in, scraped against the hardwood floor as though being dragged. Emma froze. The basement door, which usually stayed shut tight, was ajar. A pale sliver of light spilled out, though no bulb had ever worked down there. Emma rose, every nerve alight. With trembling hands, she flicked the switch by the door. The light flooded the hallway only to reveal Sophie standing at the top of the staircase, her face illuminated in an unnatural glow. In her hand she held the latest drawing, a rendition of the basement staircase, and at the bottom the silhouette waiting patiently. "Sophie!" Emma cried, her voice cracking. But Sophie only stepped aside, beckoning Emma down. Emma's legs felt like lead. She swallowed and took a step forward, compelled by a force she could not name. Just then, the light flickered and went out. The hallway vanished into a suffocating darkness, and the basement door swung shut behind Sophie with a final, thundering bang. Emma froze, her heart lodged in her throat. Somewhere below, the sound of slow, deliberate scratching began, like many nails on old wood. The air grew frigid, and though she strained to see, the darkness clung to her vision like a living thing. Emma whispered into the black, "Sophie? It's Mommy. Please." The scratching stopped. In the silence that followed, Emma sensed a pair of eyes watching her from the gloom. They were empty hollows at first, then bright pinpricks of white light. A low rasp drifted upward, words spoken in a tongue that curled around her mind like smoke. Emma's mouth fell open, but no sound came out. Behind her eyelids, she saw Sophie's drawings, each one unfurling and twisting until they were real and worse than anything she had ever drawn. Shapes emerged in the darkness, long limbs, jagged smiles, hands with too many fingers. And then a soft, childish giggle. Emma's blood turned to ice. She clutched the wall for balance, praying for her daughter's voice, for a way back into the world of light and safety. But the basement door remained closed and the darkness waited. Emma's last thought before she descended was of the first drawing on the fridge, the X-dried sun. How, she wondered, did a child convince the sun itself to bear witness to horrors no human should ever see? And as the ladder creaked beneath her weight, she realized that the real terror was only just beginning, a truth that no one, not even Sophie, could fully understand. Emma's foot found the first rung of the ladder, its metal cold and slick beneath her palm. Every nerve screamed at her to turn away, to flee back into the safety of the light-filled hallway, but the lullaby of Sophie's voice, silent yet insistent, guided her downward. With each creaking step, the rasping of voices grew stronger, forming words that hissed through the stale air. "Come play forever." By the time she reached the bottom, Emma's lungs were burning. She flicked on a single bare bulb that hung from the ceiling on a frayed cord. It buzzed weakly, illuminating the concrete chamber, walls coated in damp, peeling paint, a small workbench piled with rusted tools, and, in the center, a circle of children's drawings arranged like a mandala, their corners curling as though alive. At the center of the mandala stood Sophie, her small frame lit by the ghostly glow of the bulb. In her hand was a final drawing, larger than the rest, a panorama of the house Emma thought she knew. The windows were gouged out like empty eye sockets, the roof sagged under some invisible weight, and, standing on the lawn, dozens of stick figures pressed their hollow faces to the shattered glass. Above the house, the sky was a writhing mass of eyes and jagged teeth. Emma dropped to her knees. "Sophie, what is this? Where did it come from?" Her voice trembled so badly she could barely hear herself. Sophie's lips parted in a sad smile. "It's the real house, Mommy. The one behind the drawings. The one that's always been here." She held out the paper. Emma's trembling fingers brushed it and the world convulsed. Suddenly, the walls seemed to pulse, the damp paint peeling away like dead skin to reveal something ancient and slimy beneath. The bulb flickered and died, plunging the room back into suffocating darkness. Emma's scream echoed off the concrete, but Sophie's soft laugh cut through the blackness, eerier than any noise she'd heard before. A single, intense point of light appeared behind Sophie's head, growing brighter until it resolved into a face, pale, smooth, and expressionless except for a grin too wide to be human. Its eyes were obsidian pits, reflecting Emma's horror. The thing stepped forward, and the ring of drawings lifted from the floor, spinning around them in a cyclone of paper and crayon dust. Emma grabbed for Sophie, but the girl slipped through her arms like mist. Sophie's voice drifted to her from every direction at once. "Look, Mommy, they're waking up." The drawings flared to life. Stick figures climbed from the swirling papers, their limbs stretching, twisting into grotesque parodies of humanity. They pulled themselves upright, eyes glowing with malignant hunger. Emma clawed at the basement door it held fast. She turned to Sophie, whose small face was pale and distant. "Sophie, we have to go," Emma pleaded. "I can't," Sophie whispered, stepping backward into the swirl of drawings. "They won't let me." Emma's heart shattered. She lunged toward her daughter, but the creatures formed a ring around Sophie, their papery flesh rustling and faintly damp. They hissed as one. "Stay with us forever," Emma roared, throwing herself at the nearest creature. Her fingers met nothing but loosed paper and cold air. She fell, and the creatures swarmed, pressing against her, climbing over her legs like countless ants. A blinding flash of white light exploded through the room, and Emma was thrown backward, the creatures scattering like torn leaves. For a moment, she lay gasping, blinded. When her vision cleared, Sophie stood alone in the center of the ring, clutching the final drawing to her chest. Opposite her hovered the pale-faced thing from before. Sophie's eyes were unfocused, her body rigid. "Release her!" Emma screamed at the apparition, struggling to rise. The thing's smile widened, and it raised an impossibly thin finger. With a soft pop, Sophie's drawing disintegrated in her hand, the paper curling into ash. Sophie lurched forward, and Emma caught her, pulling her close. The girl's eyes, once glowing with something not quite human, blinked, and she looked at Emma with frightened confusion. "Mommy? I'm cold," Sophie whispered, her teeth chattering. Emma wrapped her coat around Sophie's trembling shoulders and scooped her into her arms. Behind them, the ring of drawings rustled as the creatures reformed, eyes fixed on the pair. Emma backed toward the ladder, shielding Sophie's face. "You can't have her," Emma shouted, climbing the first rung. "They belong to us." The creatures echoed, voices weaving into a single, dreadful chorus. Feet pounding above, Emma slammed the basement door shut with the last of her strength. She bolted the latch and pressed her back against the wood, panting. Sophie sobbed quietly in her arms. Emma felt the door tremble under the assault of the creatures on the other side, their papery claws scratching at the wood, their whispers clawing at her mind. Emma's thoughts raced. The drawings, they were more than pictures, they were gateways. The only chance was to destroy them all. She reached into her coat pocket and withdrew her keys, then her phone, broken signal still flickering. She thumbed the flashlight app on, its beam weak but usable. "Sophie, do you have more drawings?" Emma asked, voice steady despite her fear. Sophie nodded, wiping her tears. "In the box? But I can't. It's locked." Emma's breath caught. The box was back on her nightstand, somehow returned through the door they'd closed. She had the key in her pocket. Gathering every ounce of courage, she flipped the latch and pried the door open an inch. Instantly, a wave of cold and whispers rolled out, but Emma pushed through, holding Sophie tight. The basement lay in ruins. The mandala dissolved, the creatures vanished, as though they'd never been. Emma sprinted up the stairs, Sophie clinging to her waist, until she burst through the front door into the dawn. The morning air was crisp and bright, an impossible comfort. Behind her, the basement door slammed shut, the house silent once more. Emma held Sophie close, tears mingling with relief. "We're safe now," she whispered. But Sophie's eyes, wide and sad, met hers with a single question. "Mommy, are you sure?" Emma swallowed hard and nodded, though her voice trembled. "I'm sure. No more drawings." But when she reached into her pocket, the keys were there, alongside a single, folded scrap of paper she didn't remember taking. Her heart stilled. She unfolded it with shaking fingers. On the page was a simple sketch, a mother and daughter walking hand in hand down a quiet suburban street. Above them, the trees were ordinary, the sky blue, and the sun rounded and warm. In the corner, in tiny letters, was written, "Until next time." Emma dropped the paper, horror blooming anew. Behind her, the house stood silent, its windows dark. Yet Emma knew, deep down, that the drawings would never truly end. And neither would the waiting. Thank you very much. See you all in the next video.